Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely to see you all here. Good crowd, and we're always interested just to see the demographic, and a lot of young people here tonight. I wonder why. Damian thinks you might have been reading his social media site. But anyway, it's very nice to have you here to the third in the Game Changer series for 2014. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Turrbal people, and pay respects to their ancestors, the people who came before them. The location of the State Library on Kurilpa Point was historically a significant meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and tonight we continue that tradition. I'd like to acknowledge Damian Griffiths, our guest interviewee tonight, and also Ray Weeks, Chairman of the CEO Institute and member of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Governing Committee. The Game Changer series is an initiative of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame, which was established 6 or so years ago to gather the stories of our great business achievers over the last 150 years and into the future. We want to create in the State Library a Queensland business memory so that for all time people can see the great pioneers of business, the great entrepreneurs, the great leaders and the great leading businesses and iconic brands, so that not only today's generation but those in the future will be able to see how the state developed economically and socially. The Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame is a partnership between the State Library of Queensland, the QUT Business School, and the Queensland Library Foundation. Last week we celebrated our 6th induction dinner with a record crowd and the induction of 6 really outstanding Queenslanders. And we would be delighted if you take an interest in that. It's a wonderful night of celebration, but more importantly, it's really part of a very long-term project to capture all of these stories in the one place, make them available digitally, and to collect as many original materials as we can for the State Library and its history collection. But we'd just like to show you a little bit about the great people who have been inducted into the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame. Sir Vincent Fairfax was a real surprise to most people. Most people thought he was from New South Wales, but he was a passionate Queenslander for the whole of his life, notwithstanding the fact that he was in Sydney for many years and was a distinguished leader on the national stage and an extraordinary philanthropist. So without further ado, it's my pleasure now to invite Ray Weeks, who will be conducting the interview this evening, to make some introductory comments. Thanks, Ray.
Well, welcome. Sorry about that video, but we might just be able to show that to you a little later. Welcome to this, the third of our Game Changers events for 2014. And as many of you well know, and I can see I've seen a number of you before at one of these Game Changers events, this Game Changers series is all about bringing leaders in innovation from business, technology and creative industries, bringing our Queensland entrepreneurs with successful national and international businesses to this place to share with us their stories, their insights and the key lessons that they've learned along the way. Now we're here to understand how these leaders in building their companies engendered creativity, inspired teams, managed the dynamics of change and drove remarkable growth. Damian Griffiths has been shaping and challenging Brisbane's social landscape for the last 6 years. He's been dubbed the godfather of bar culture, which can be seriously misunderstood, but it's more what it means. But Damian is the name behind Alfred and Constance, the Limes Hotel, and also the Chester Street Bakery and Bar, and some other establishments. He's turned a quiet fringe area of Fortitude Valley into a true entertainment precinct. Now, Malcolm Gladwell once said that the entrepreneur takes risks, but he doesn't see himself as a risk taker. He doesn't see himself as a risk taker because he operates under the useful delusion that what he's attempting is not risky. If that is the case, and as The Economist said, the delusions of entrepreneurs seem to be the seeds of economic progress. And the term entrepreneur was coined not by George W. Bush, but by the 18th century Irish-French economist who defined it as a bearer of risk. So it seems that you must have an unreasonable understanding of risk and an unreasonable level of confidence as an entrepreneur, or you'll never get started. And that's what we might look at tonight. So let's hear from the immigration lawyer turned entrepreneur Damian Griffiths as to whether any of this is reasonable. Please welcome Damian Griffiths. Welcome. Now, Damian, let's start with your journey. Let's hear, because you've had, I think, a really interesting personal journey. You've come off a farm in Dalby. You've got some rural background. You grew up in Dalby. So how much of this background is still you? And just take us through your personal journey.
I was born on a grain farm in Dalby and educated in Toowoomba. I guess that whole initial life of just growing up on a farm, growing up in a country town, work ethic. I suppose my parents worked for themselves, my grandparents worked for themselves. I grew up in a family business. My father was in partnership with his four brothers his entire life. So it was kind of, I suppose, that was the sort of, I guess I always wanted to work for myself, much the same as my parents had.
And how much of the farm boy is still in you?
Not a lot, sadly. I'm not as, I'm certainly not as practical. I have two brothers who are farmers, and I'm not as practical as they are. But it's still, I think the values still stick with you. I mean, it's country towns are a great place to grow up and a great place to spend your childhood. There's something sort of somewhat almost innocent about growing up in a country town. But it's still probably, I guess, that work ethic that farmers have, that responsibility, the ups and downs of, they tend to be, I think farmers are very tolerant people. They just accept a lot of things.
So that work ethic, as you said, is a big factor still in your... Any other values that you hold dear that really have come out of some of...
Well, I suppose the sort of desire to, that you have to look after yourself, and in the sense that, you've got the obligation to, to have the responsibility for your own, I suppose, financial well-being. No one else has kind of got that responsibility. And, I think farms, you've often got to grow up with the same people living beside you for generations. So you've got to get on well with your neighbours, and you've got to basically cooperate, have that sort of community spirit. And I think, that those sort of values, I think, stick with you for life.
So we'll come back later to how some of these values feed into your management style, your leadership style. But just tell me, what does it mean to be a hotelier and a hospitality entrepreneur in Queensland?
Well, I think Queensland, and probably drawing back to sort of country towns, is that I think hospitality is just that. You have got to be hospitable to people. It's as simple as that. And I think in Queensland, we still have very much there's a lot of a big country town mentality, say in Brisbane. You've got to be approachable to people. You've got to be seen by people. You've got to be physically present around your venues. I think people in Queensland have a real sense of keeping it real. And that, I think a lot of the, I suppose, people who are more successful than I am in this kind of industry have achieved that by, basically almost applying a country town pub mentality to what I do today.
So let's look at this incredible growth story. How have you managed this, the growth of the Alfred and Constance, the Limes Hotel, and the rapid expansion of 4 venues in only 6 years?
Look, I guess we've grabbed opportunities when they've arisen. We've taken risks to try and, I suppose, seize the moment while those opportunities are there. But to a large extent, I suppose, what we've had this very unique opportunity that I think is probably something that might not happen in many parts of the world, where we've been able to acquire sites very close to each other, and it's very rare that you could pick up sites literally just, we started with the Limes Hotel, and 2 doors down, Alfred and Constance, then there was the Alfredos, then there was Quan Brothers, and all these adjoining properties. So we've got this really unique position where opportunities came up, and we just did it. I just did it. I probably didn't really, I never intended, there was never an intention to go and do that, but those opportunities came up, and you just had to take the chance.
But why the focus on the valley? Why? What did you see in an area that was pretty run down at the time you were looking at these properties?
Yeah, I suppose there was also a bit of a naivety. When I came to the valley, probably 17 years ago, I'm having to sort of add backwards now, but 17 years ago, there was something, the valley always kind of fascinated me. It had the edge, it was this edgy part of town, it was changing, it was certainly pretty, it certainly had points where it was pretty grim back, 17 years ago, and it had an incredibly checkered history, but it had come out of that whole Fitzgerald era, and it was suddenly starting to transform. There was some bigger operators that had come in and had started to take on sites again, and it fascinated me because every time I looked around I could see something happening that was different, and that's, at the moment, in the last couple of years, that's very, very rapid, and anyone who drives through there sees the cranes and the residential towers that are coming. But it was just somewhere where, when I first came to build Limes Hotel, that was like, I had this idea, I wanted to build a hotel, I wanted to build a small hotel, and that was the cheapest site I could find in the city. And I went and I literally bought this site that was just a rundown house in ruins, and built the Limes, and I didn't really think too much, to be honest, of whether this would work. I just thought, this is cheap and it's close to the city, and that was the motive.
So what would have been some of the big surprises for you coming out of this development?
Well, I suppose the biggest surprise was the GFC. I suppose when we first built the hotel, everything costs more than, I had no experience in dealing with I'd handled some smaller renovations on commercial buildings, but I'd never built a hotel, and that was my first serious building project. So I think there's probably a lot of things you could start with a simpler project. And at the end of the project, the costs had way exceeded, and we were faced in the situation where the bank at the time, who we were dealing with, just said, look, that's it, there's no more money, don't have any more to lend. The GFC had hit, their whole lending book was just, and literally opening a hotel with a pile of bills and having to sort of start something is a tough experience to sort of and having to sort of trade through that, but it also taught me a lot of lessons about just dealing with people, talking to builders, people being upfront, because at the end of the day, people generally they want to get paid, and they also want you to succeed because they know it's ongoing business. So there's a lot of if you communicate with people, you can trade through things.
But you would have had a pretty creative funding strategy during this time too. I mean, you couldn't rely on the banks at this time fully. No,
and it got to the point where the banks just basically stopped lending, and particularly in commercial hotels, it was just that was an area they just didn't want to be in. And I remember sort of going back to the bank and saying, well, look, I've got this pile of bills still to pay because the projects cost more. And the bank manager saying, look, just talk to the people, do a deal with them, don't do a deal, and just having to pay people off and trade through it. And I think that sort of taught me that and then what we did was we were able to sort of add value. So we sort of, I suppose the model was to sort of, buy a rundown piece of land, build a hotel. But then what happened was I suppose the value we created was the business, and that then enhanced the value of the property. And then it was possible to constantly, to sort of leverage and use that asset to do other properties and other investments.
And there would have been a number of suppliers would have taken a punt on you too. It would take a bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that you've got if you've got I think back of some particular suppliers who did that, and some of them were big. Was a big one of them was a big company, and they gave me trade terms that they've never given anybody those kind of trade terms, not even big players. But I think they probably could see the realness, and I think if you can keep it real, I think suppliers probably often get angry if you're driving around town in the Porsche and not paying them. But if you can keep communicating, and that's probably what it taught me in that whole time, was you had to just keep talking to suppliers, because if that credit system stopped, a lot of business was going to fall over.
Your dad had an interesting view about you and debt.
Yeah, he's a farmer that he just, they don't believe in debt. The account comes, they return the account with a cheque. It's paid the same day.
Sure.
And farmers are very like that. I think they're very, I suppose, honest, simple trade. They like to sort of, have a clean slate, and I guess for them, they don't take the risk because they don't know whether the next season's going to be good. So when they've got money, they'll spend it. And when they don't have money, they don't spend it. But I mean, his sort of joke is that for me, that I sort of stay one jump ahead of the bank manager at all times, and I suppose that's the model of an entrepreneur who relies on banks, who doesn't, to try and, to keep, you have to keep going to the next project, and you need a really good bank manager. You need people who believe in you.
So, what kind of a risk taker are you? What's your attitude to risk?
I guess, when I started, a lot of the things that I did, I didn't really sort of think too much about what I had to. I felt I didn't have much to lose, and the reality is I probably did have a lot to lose. But I think I don't really have that sort of. I don't sort of really think too much. When I say I don't think too much, I think I wake up every morning for that single reason that I have mortgages, and no different to people who have houses But I have that. I have to keep working every morning. I have to keep thinking. Well, I've got the responsibilities. I've got that. That's the incentive that gets me to work every day. Is that responsibility? So I suppose, but at the same time, I'll take on a risk that other people probably would say, "There's no way I'm doing that." And I'll have a go, because I think you've got to grab opportunities. You've got to grab them while they're there.
Because the economic value that you've created with this precinct, I mean, how many people work for you? 200?
There's around 200, yeah.
So just take us through some of the impact, the economic impact of what you've done.
Well, I suppose like when you, we've taken on these properties, we've spent money refurbishing them, we've increased their value, we employ a lot of people, both full time and casual, and I guess it's become it's a big operation now for us. My terms, it's I'm not a public listed company, but as from where I was 6 years ago, it's my payroll is massive, and that brings, I suppose, you constantly got to be looking at cash flow. You constantly got to monitor the cash flow, and you've constantly got to keep marketing and keep developing your product to keep customers returning and having good experiences.
So what are the 2 or 3 gauges that you look at constantly to make sure the business is operating well?
Look, I guess you've got a cash flow. I think is that big thing. You've got to always be looking at what you've got coming in, and what you owe, and what responsibilities you've got to deal with. And then I'm I suppose, on the floor a lot, so I'm around the venues a lot. So you've got to be, you've got to keep customers happy. You've got to keep staff happy. You've got to keep suppliers happy. You've got to dance to many people, and if you can do that, you get the whole thing going. It runs well.
So how have you responded to this changing entertainment and hospitality hub in Brisbane? You've got the idea of not wanting a Tuesday to Sunday week and kitchens closing at 9 p.m, which is a pretty distinctive feature in a lot of Brisbane. Yep. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I suppose what I've tried to do is, I've in my own way, I've tried to push the boundaries for people. And what I've sort of come along is I came and said, okay, I want to create an area or a precinct where people will come to, and we trade 7 days, and I'm a big believer in trading 7 days. One, I think we're in the business to provide a service as well to customers. So if someone wants to eat on a Monday night and the restaurant's closed, and that might be the only night they can go out, well, we've got to cater for everyone. And there's nights when we don't make a lot of money, and there's nights we do, but we've got to provide that service. You also get you can get a lot happier staff to some extent, because you can give, particularly hospitality has a lot of casual staff, so a lot of it might be students or part-time. They need hours, and they want flexible hours, so you can create a lot more jobs for people, which in turn sort of allows you to sort of retain more people. So so I think, and so it's pretty much, and then I've pushed things like kitchens staying open. We have one of our venues that serves food right through till 3 a.m. and 7 days, and well, it's on 3 a.m. on weekends, but during the weeknights, every night of the week till 1 o'clock, and I insist on that. And it's taken a lot to, even to deal with chefs to try and get them to come around. And there's nights when they say, but they'll send me a text at midnight saying, boss, can we close? There's no one here. It's cold and wet, and everyone in Brisbane's rugged up. And you say, well, stay open, because that's what we marketed. And then the next night, the church choir group will roll up at midnight and want to be fed, and you've just got to take the swings and the roundabouts, yeah.
So your success relies on the continual development of new and interesting venues. I mean, how are you going to respond to this challenge in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I look at, if you want to, it's particularly in hospitality, if you want to retain good staff and you want to retain interest even from customers in your venues, you've got to keep expanding, because the reality is that there's a certain element of us that we all like to go to the hot new place in town, and then there's a certain element that after a period of time we want to go back to the places we like. A lot of people are creatures of habit, so we find the local restaurant, or we find the local coffee shop, or we find something we like. So you're creating new customers, and at the same time maintaining old customers. And so for me, I want to continue while I've got the energy to keep expanding, keep trying to get new venues going. It's not easy. Every time you do it, you say this is harder than the last one. But part of it is also it becomes easier because you gain more experience. But the big thing, I think, is that you'll have a better chance of retaining staff, particularly in hospitality. People want to often, whether it's a chef or whether it's bartenders or floor staff, work for people who are doing the new venue, the new place.
So let's talk about that. How do you select the people that work for you? I mean, what are the values, the behaviours that they need to demonstrate?
Look, I've probably, over the years, I've probably become better at trying to judge people, and I think that just comes with age. I think you try and get. I think as you get into your 30s, you probably get a bit wiser, and you can start to make sort of gut reactions to a person from an initial interview or talking to them over the phone. But generally, I say to my managers, and I say, hire people primarily just on the people skills. I think if the attitude's right, you can teach. if the attitude's wrong, you've got no hope. So, generally, we've given some people a chance who you'd think there's no way. They just don't have the experience. And we're in an industry that deals a lot with like skill shortages. And so we have to take on people who don't necessarily have all the qualifications, and we have to provide the training, because they're not going to come knocking on our door and say, well, I've got X years experience cooking. They're often going to say, well, okay, can you teach us? Can you train us? So I generally sort of say, try and go more on the people skills and just the initial reaction of talking to people. And in fact, we often sort of avoid a lot of paper CVs. We often say, just come in and talk to us. And then we can, and there's often you get hired on the spot. And that's how it is.
So they've got the energy, they've got the passion, they've got the right attitude.
Start tomorrow.
You can then start training.
Yeah.
Good. How do you, on that basis, how do you engender creativity and passion in your staff? How do you do that?
I think that's something that I have to try, particularly being at the helm of this, have to drive. And I suppose that staff recognise the fact that if the owner or the boss, or however you want to refer to it, has the passion, it flows down. People. I work with, I suppose, a lot of young people, and you are modelled when you're young by the people you surround yourself with. So I think for me, it's just I have to display that characteristic. Then it flows down to the team below, and then it flows down again. And also too, I suppose, the style of venues we're trying to do, we cater a lot for young people. So we've got to be, we're always looking for edgy concepts and things to bring to the table.
And entrepreneurial qualities with your staff as well. You look for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've taken that. I've sort of had to change from being when I had Limes Hotel employing roughly 10 staff to 20-fold, I guess, in a short period of time, and going from where I was the boss and I made all the decisions, and I suddenly realised that if that model just doesn't work, you've now got, and now I say to people, it's better just make a call, because a lot of our decisions in hospitality are just on the spot. Make a call. It's better you make some decision than no decision, and I sort of work on that philosophy, and you try and guide people, I suppose, to the direction you want, and as they get more experience, they'll come to the right answer. But I think pushing people, if you don't I've made that mistake before of not allowing staff to they're too frightened to make a decision. And now I sort of push that model of saying, no, you decide, you make the call, and sometimes I'll tell them that was good, or you could do that better, or that's you've got to. That's, I think, a responsibility I have.
So a key part of your leadership is to show the trust, the confidence. I mean, employ the right people.
Yeah.
Show the trust and confidence, and then just show that let them get on with it. Give them the direction.
Yeah, and I think you can make the mistake when you're a very hands-on business owner that can sometimes, I suppose, hinder things too, because the boss is always around. But I think my team have sort of come to accept that I'm a very hands-on person, and I'm around. But I think by the same token, I think they see that that's how the style works. The boss sometimes picks up plates or picks up glasses or wipes a table. You've just got to do that and lead by example.
Yes. So any other personal attributes of a good leader that you want to emulate?
Look, I suppose you just got to constantly try and get people to be upfront and try and like often, I suppose, hospitality. Today kids will text you and make up stories, and there's splendour in the grass on this weekend. So it's sort of do I work or do I go to a festival? I guess the festival only comes around once a year. and you just say to them, be upfront. Just tell us, we can plan around that. If that's and often we have to, I suppose, we don't have the control where we have to sort of work around their lifestyles, and that's just the nature of our industry.
So if I just ask a few members of your staff, tell me about Damian Griffiths' style, his management style. What do you think they'd say?
They'd probably say he's crazy. He's always around. He's always about. Doesn't sleep. I think. Look, I've generally tried to be personal. I think there's always that. When I'm around, there's a bit of a fear factor, but it's probably in a good way. I think people see it that but I've had to. I refer to everyone by first name, and I'm friends with a lot of staff on Facebook, and it's not that I want to be involved in their lives or anything, but they'll I think particularly when you're working in hospitality today, you've got to be on their level. We are friends, or we're at work, we're colleagues together, and there's times when yes, you've got to be the big bad boss and you've got to shout but it's no different, I suppose, to running a big family. But I think if you want to get the most out of people, you're not going to get it by shouting and screaming in this industry. You've got to really work on their level and talk to them, and that's, I suppose, it's that trying to be very personal, and sometimes I have colleagues who are in other industries and they can't quite get their head around that. They think the boss is the boss, and and it's you have a different role, and they sort of think why are you doing this? Why are you picking up the plate? That's why you've got a whole heap of people here to do that. But you just got to kind of you've just got to work with them, and then eventually, whoever is might say, oh, okay, I should be out there doing that, or I shouldn't, and that's how I think you work a lot. You get a lot better results, particularly in the hospitality industry.
And as a leader, you've got to show consistency.
Yep.
You've got to show a belief that you believe in ownership, so they can own their own decisions, they can make the decisions, and you're not going to be there micromanaging them.
Yeah, and I think that comes, and particularly as I've learned to, as I've expanded, you have to, you can't be there all the time. I'll try and move around the venues, particularly on busy nights. I make a point. I try and go to every venue. I try and, I'll talk to the key staff. I'll say hello to everyone. I'll stand around. I'll talk to customers, but you realise that. There's nights too where you're stuck at a particular venue. You can't go there, but I think just by being around all the time is a big morale boost for the staff, as much as they think, well, the boss is here. It's also the fact that and they actually also too appreciate sometimes that I do leave them alone. They'll actually say, I think they actually think, well, he had enough confidence, didn't come and wander around tonight, or, say something to us, or, things like that.
Every entrepreneur we've spoken to talks about where they lost it, where they really lost it. They just didn't believe. There were moments where you felt this is just not going to work out. How am I going to recover from this? Want to share some of those?
Well, I suppose like at that sort of point with the GFC, when particularly, banks became really tough, and and I've had those sort of moments, and dealing with like when we were building Alfred and Constance, we could only get we were trying to take 2 dilapidated houses and convert them to a bar restaurant complex, and the bank sent in a valuer to value it, and it just couldn't. We're showing them a set of plans, and we're showing them a rundown house, and they just couldn't understand it, and they just couldn't, and the area was a construction site. There was so much construction going on around us, and getting that result back, and then suddenly there's your valuation. So the bank say, well, okay, we can lend you that much money to build, and full well that project's going to cost 3 to 4 times that, but that somehow you're going to do it, and you know that somehow, you know, whether it's, you know, whatever, you know, you're gonna somehow do it and get there. And I suppose at that point, you know, you sort of think it's all too hard. I mean, there's plenty of times I've often thought to put the for sale signs up and just say, it's too hard, there's an easier life. It's usually on a Friday afternoon. And by Monday morning, you're thinking of expanding. But it's you know, and I suppose it happens, you know, and it's just I suppose the sometimes you just feel like you're alone in trying to do something, but you just realise that, you know, nothing comes easy. Everything's got to have a struggle. You know, very few people got there by just having it handed to them, and if they did, often they're bored and, you know, they wouldn't have as much fun, you know, in that sort of game of trying to get it to happen. Yeah.
And when you said you felt alone at times. Did you have mentors along the way? Did you have people you could rely on for advice, that you sought out advice?
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I started like most business people, and, you know, and had the relationship with like a, you know, family accountant and those kind of people. But I sort of felt that over time I outgrew those relationships, you know, that the family accountant who is probably you know, an expert in rural business, knew very little about what I was doing, couldn't really understand it. And then I've sort of, I suppose, along the way, it's often been other business people that I've gained more from, and you know, it's been people like a guy who's a very successful building contractor, not exactly in the industry, but has just a lot of commercial experience, and people like that who you meet in the journey, and that you can call, talk to, and often you find a lot of older people are often very willing to, they admire you, you know, and they sort of think, okay, you know, you're the shadow, you know, you were them 20, 30, whatever years ago. And so I think, you know, that's often, you know, advice I'd give to people is, you know, try and surround yourself by people who've done it, you know, and often I would talk to people like, you know, my family, and say, look, you know, we don't know, you know, we can't, you know, and I realised that they're in a different experience, you know, different sort of world, you know, as well.
What about your life purpose? Did you ever, all of us in the 20s and 30s, the last thing we ever think about is what we don't define our life purpose, or what is our purpose in life? Have you been at a point recently where you understand what your life purpose is?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I would, if you told me 20 something years ago that you know, when I was sort of you know, I'm sort of lying a bit about my age here now, I've got to be honest, 24 years ago, that as I was sort of walking out of the, you know, the gates at Downlands College in Toowoomba, that I was going to be doing this, I would have run the other way, you know, and it's just, you know, I suppose it's just a journey that I ended up in this area, but I felt in the last couple of years particularly that this is what I should have been doing. I actually genuinely enjoy the hospitality industry, yet that it was an industry that I was never on my agenda, never on my radar. The career counsellor never told me to follow this. In fact, if I had, I think I would have you know, kept my my part-time job at high school washing dishes and learned a lot more. Yeah.
So how do you go from being an immigration lawyer to a head of a hospitality precinct like that?
Yeah, look, I guess it happened just from the point of view of, I suppose, getting involved in property and buying old buildings and renovating them and we started in budget accommodation and ended up doing, I suppose, a project like Limes. Then that turned into more food and beverage focus, which is where we sort of are today, or am today. It really just sort of happens. You know, it's a journey that you just sort of end up, and you just think, you know, you do a project and you suddenly think, well, you know, this is good, and you know, you could do another one and do another one, and but you know, laws. I think, you know, a professional background is good. It's good experience. It's good. I think it gave me a certain confidence in the business world. It mightn't have equipped me, into how to, pour beers or pick up plates or anything like that. But particularly the way my model works of taking properties and developing them and adding in food and beverage businesses into those properties, I think it gave me some great help.
So what would you say to would-be entrepreneurs in this field?
I think you've got to. Probably get some industry experience. I think I recently talked to someone about this very issue, and I said to them, go and work in a bar or go and work in a restaurant or get behind the counter. And I think, try and get, it's a very hands-on industry. So I think try and get that experience, because I think it'll help you a lot more in running these kind of businesses. So I suppose it's that old sort of thing of, if you're going to buy a news agency, go and work in one first, or, go and try and understand that. Try and get, I suppose, try and really understand your markets and look at what's going on. It's very competitive. Look at what's happening overseas. Look at what you can bring to the market. I think you've really got to know your product and have a direction of what you want, but don't be afraid to change that if it's wrong.
So we're sitting in the State Library, and how important do you think it is for institutions like the State Library to tell stories of entrepreneurs like you?
Well, yeah. I suppose I was pretty flattered that I got asked, because I don't see myself in the leagues of some of the great business people, and I think there's a lot of greater business people that are out in Brisbane that could offer a lot more. But I guess when I was particularly younger, to be able to listen and to hear people's stories will either, I suppose, give you inspiration to have a go yourself, and maybe you'll pick up one or 2 points that'll really help you in whatever journey you're going to take, if it is to start your own business or do something yourself. Yeah. So I think it's important. Yeah.
But you've got to see yourself as a game changer. Well, we've chosen you as a game changer, and you've got to see yourself as one.
Believe in yourself. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the victim of my country town mentality. Is you're taught to keep it pretty real.
Yeah, but you've changed the character. Oh my God! I love it. Now, looking back, as Steve Jobs once said, connecting the dots. And so you're looking back. You can't look forward and see where you're going. As you said, sometimes right place, right time.
Yep.
Or simply you make a decision based on something that suddenly hits you. But if you look back and connect the dots, what do you think the secrets of your success are?
I guess probably it's like a hunger to try and get something to whether it's and not necessarily in a financial sense, but I think it's a hunger to try and achieve something, hunger to kind of leave your mark on some area. I guess the ambition and the hunger sort of go hand in hand. You want to do something, you want to get bigger, you want to grow something. So yeah, it's probably for me it's those kind of things, and just the fact that you develop something where you have a responsibility to people. You've got to come to you've got a lot of people who are relying on you financially, whether it's staff or suppliers, banks, and so that's what sort of gives you the incentive, I think, to come every day. And also, I suppose, it's the chance, particularly in somewhere like Brisbane, to be able to do new things. And I think if we're in Sydney or Melbourne, if I was in Sydney or Melbourne, it would be harder. It would be financially harder to do things. And I think Brisbane's a great, without sort of going on and on, I think Brisbane's a really good place to do business, particularly right now, because it's changing very, very rapidly. You know, we're on a real cusp of change, and with that, I think people are very receptive to new ideas, to whether it's new trends in restaurants or foods and things like that. But being able to follow trends is, I think, very important. I think you've got to, your trend is your friend. And I know a lot of people, there are some restaurateurs that, just reading an article about a guy in Melbourne, Ronnie D'Stasio, he's got a great place, but he sticks to a proven formula and he doesn't follow trends, or he doesn't believe in trends. But in my sort of business model, I look for trends and I try and adapt. And there's certain parts I have to keep, and certain parts my customers want me to keep. But I think you've got to keep moving with your customers, and you've got to keep sort of moving with trends generally of where people are at. And that's, whilst I'm sort of I think young enough to be in touch with the market, that I think is, I'm fortunate that I can do that.
It's interesting, Steve Jobs, when he was at that commencement ceremony, I think it was North Carolina University, at the end of it, you talk about hunger. He said his final statement to the students was, "Stay hungry, stay foolish."
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think I'm not at that point where I feel like I should just. I mean, people often say to me, "Oh, why don't you slow down? Why don't you stop? You know, you've got this, you've got that. Keep those places." And I suppose I just think, while I've got the hunger, while I've got the desire, the energy, I should keep doing things, because I'm sure perhaps there may come a point in my life when I might not have that same energy anymore. And I suppose the fear of becoming yesterday's man is a fear for me.
So where to from here? What's your growth strategy from here? Tell us about your personal objectives from here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, as you know, I think while as I said, I'm looking at, I've got another project ready to come, and I'm hoping to start that maybe towards the end of this year or next year. We've just acquired a site, and we want to do another venue in Brisbane. I look for, I suppose, obscure sites, things that are probably not on the radar of most restaurateurs or bar owners, and I'm looking at, and I like that model of sort of going a little bit against the odds, you know, taking an area where, you know, it's not desirable and making it something. So that's the next project. I've got this one coming up here in Brisbane. After that, I guess I'll just sort of keep looking for things, keep looking for ideas. And I think whilst the team are around me, I think it's a good way of keeping them interested. It's a good way of attracting that, you know, more staff, whilst you're opening and expanding. And I think once you stop expanding, I think the risk is that some of those key people may lose interest in your product too.
And the thing is too, you're effectively you've got a 20% shareholder in your business.
Yep. Passive
investor.
Yes.
So your 80% is very much the active shareholding.
Yep.
So you're not looking for any other shareholders. You're not looking for any other partners. You're not looking for commercial partners. You're quite happy.
Yes.
To keep driving this business the way it is.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I guess you know, I have a key lieutenant in the business. That's always, I suppose, the risk, and at some point, I suppose, there will come a limit as to how far Damian Griffiths can go, you know, and then I have to move to the next level of business. And right at the moment, I'm not particularly interested in that, but part of that is probably just the fear of losing that personal contact. And I think once I can come up with that ideas or come up with that strategy of how to maintain the personal contact, the last thing I want to do is become a franchise or a brand. I still want to keep creating unique venues, unique experiences here in Brisbane. But once I can sort of, you know, as I can sort of develop that system, that may be possible. But at the moment, it's still to sort of stay within that group and keep attracting key management that can help me run it.
but at a certain point, the scale will change that. We're going to look for questions from everyone out there. So there are microphones ready from the audience to take any. Who'd like to start? First question. I'm going to wait here till you ask a question. Who'd like to open up? Anyone? Right, thank you. Now just wait for a microphone if we can. Just here. Thanks very much.
How do you stay motivated from day to day? Because I know hospitality can become quite repetitive.
Yep.
I know you have a lot of venues, but it's still, that motivation can have highs and lows. So
Yeah,
how do you stay motivated?
I think, particularly this industry, it's long hours. It's sometimes you're working the other end of the spectrum, and when everyone else is having fun, you're working. But I think it's I suppose what keeps my motivation is probably researching, looking at trends, and looking and with the view of the next venue in mind. And I suppose it's kind of like I really enjoy the building of a business, and I really enjoy a venue particularly, I guess, and I really enjoy the setting up. And I've learnt to probably become a better manager. But what keeps me interested is really just that, I suppose, the next deal, the next venue, what it's going to be, and just looking at trends, and whether it's what competitors are doing down south, Brisbane, overseas. That's how I sort of keep my own motivation.
Next question? Yeah, thank you.
If there's one thing you would have done differently, what would it have been? Like any regrets, anything?
We could talk for hours. We could talk for hours. Look, maybe sometimes I think we've went to buy properties, and sometimes I think we could have expanded a lot quicker if we. I have a friend in Sydney who leases a lot of his properties, and he has expanded a lot quicker in the hotel industry. And so I suppose the old-fashioned sort of idea of trying to own your own business premises, it can slow you down to some extent. It has its pros and cons. You don't have a landlord. He has landlord problems. So we've tried to sort of, that's perhaps something that I would have, if maybe been a little bit more ambitious in that sense, and that might have allowed a more rapid expansion. So looking at that, just looking at, I suppose, a different style of business model.
Any big opportunities that you missed?
Yeah, there's but no regrets.
No regrets?
No regrets.
Okay,
yeah.
good. Next question? Yeah, thank you.
Two questions, actually. I appreciate that you're in the growth phase, but do you have an exit strategy in your mind? I appreciate you might not want to share it, but in years to come, of how you'll exit the business?
Yeah, I guess one of the things, I guess the model that I sort of follow is as I said, that exits, as I sort of joked before, that exit strategy often goes through my mind on a lot of Friday afternoons. And then it changes on Monday morning. But I think that often one of the things, I suppose, there's two businesses. There's one is a property business, and one is the business of the actual running of the venue itself, the food and beverage. So I suppose that one option is always that you could sell the real estate, you could sell the businesses, you could lease out. So at this stage, I don't have any firm exit, other than I think that potentially I may have options, and often sometimes these businesses they rely very much on the personal exertion, I suppose, constantly to try and keep improving them so that they can operate without the the owner being present. So I feel like I'm sort of too young in that sense to have a firm exit strategy. I think my plan is at this stage to continue growing and continue to actually be a hands-on operator.
Thank you. Thank you. That kind of leads into my next question, which was, do you see yourself as a property developer or a hospitality business owner, or is it really balanced between the two?
Yeah, look, I think it's a balance in the sense that the property that I'm interested in is I suppose hospitality. You know, like I feel like we acquire properties with the purpose of, you know, doing a hospitality related business. So it's fairly niche. I guess the reality is that the reality is that one of our premises we lease, and you always feel that you don't have as much control because particularly the style of venues we do, we want to put a lot of emphasis on design. We want to basically modify. We want to do things that we feel that can enhance the experience for the customer, and that is often and the costs of fit outs is very high. So we often feel that that's sort of balanced by the fact that if we're adding some value to the property. So I see myself really as a food and beverage operator, but following a particular model of trying to acquire unique sites that we can do this in. Yeah.
And Damian, you've moved from hotels to cafe to bar to pizza to Asian cuisine. You've gone through these varying restaurant styles.
Yep.
Just explain that.
I suppose it's all about trying to create an experience and a different offering. So the Alfred and Constance, we were able to acquire adjoining sites, and that we had to do different offerings. So it's so basically whenever we do a different offering, and we don't want to, you know, I don't want to repeat the same, you know, offering. So I always look for a different food offering that we can do in each of the venues, and that's how that's been forced upon me. So, you know, you have to do a lot of research in Asian food, or you've had to do a lot of, you know, research in Italian food, or how to make the best wood-fired pizza, and that's a challenge every time. You've got to constantly, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the research of it. I enjoy looking into all the details of it, and it's part of the challenge.
Got time for two more questions. Who'd like to ask? Yes, thank you. Is there another one up here as well? Just go here first, and then we'll come up with that.
Hi. I don't know if you can answer this, but I was thinking about other food entrepreneurs in Brisbane that have done the multi-venue thing and have ended up not making it work. And I just wonder, from your perspective, if you can see the problems that can exist for people that try to do the multi-venue thing.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I look at my own. I generally sort of look at my own sort of situation, sort of, you know, every day, and I suppose that when I particularly did Alfred and Constance, that was the most adventurous one that a lot of people said, it'll never work. You know, you've got too many offerings going on in the one precinct or the one area, but by the same token, that sort of became its attraction too. People have choice, you know, and you can give the customers an experience. So it's kind of like I guess you've got to really look at your market. You mightn't get it right. Menus have got to change sometimes. You've got to respond. You know, the customer will ultimately dictate. It might not be what you think at first instance, but it's what the customers sometimes want. And I'm very much, I suppose, I'm not pedantic to the point that I will say, that's my restaurant, that's my menu. You know, I'm not the crazy French chef or something. You know, if anyone's, you know, French, my apologies, but I'm not that. You know, I generally try and respond to what the people want and give them what they want, but I want to put my spin on it. You know, and I want to give them something. Maybe, you know, something's different, but try and you know, it's a risk. You know, everything you do, you might not get it right. You know, you might have to constantly change, and you have to listen to. This is an industry that gives you feedback, very much. You know, online, Facebook, reviews, journalists write about you. You know, so you've got to respond to that.
And Damian, when you go into your Alfred and Constance and Limes and so on, it's a design treat. There's a big retro feel, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we put a big focus on design, and I believe in investing in design, and I'm always looking for the next, you know, emerging designer or young designers, because I think that, we are in the entertainment business in the sense that, we're providing an experience that customers can't get at their home, that can't get, and so we've got that obligation to constantly, we don't sort of just rely on the food. Our venues are complete. It's part of the design, it's part of the food, it's part of the music, it's part of the drink offering, the staff. It's the package, and that's where I think you've got to be.
Final question at the back. That will come to you as well. Just one second.
Cover two. Damian, great presentation. Quick question. So you're talking about a bit about your family. So you grew up in Dalby and in the farming regional area. What really was your biggest influence to sort of move from that regional place into really move into where you are now in terms of hospitality and property development, and actually what's your biggest driver in the entrepreneurial edge that you've sort of developed?
Well, I suppose particularly when we bought the properties, which are now Alfred and Constance, it was to actually find a commercial use for them. So we had a bar on top of the Limes Hotel, and so that was my first experience, I guess, in food and beverage. And then with Alfred and Constance, it was actually finding what could be done with these properties. What could you use them for? They weren't. What was the highest and best use? And so, in some ways, that was forced on me that way. So that was really the turning point. And I suppose it was really by chance, but it was really sort of saying, well, hang on, what could we do here with them? And bars, restaurants, and that was really how I sort of began that journey.
We do have a final question here. Can we get the microphone just here? Thank you very much. There was aggressive waving of the hand. I couldn't.
Hi, Damian. I just wanted to ask you, when you travel overseas, say to Asia or to Europe or to America, and when you find all your inspirations, is it a moment, or is it the food that you eat or the things that you touch that you build Alfred and Constance around, or Quan Brothers around? Or what is it that gives you inspiration?
Well, I think, certainly I've done a lot of travelling as part of the research, and when I go into venues overseas, I'm the sort of person that will actually go and talk to the chefs. And what I've found is that chefs are inherently very lonely people, and no one comes to visit them. So if you've got this guy from Australia standing at the front, and I spent quite a bit of time in a Jamie Oliver restaurant in London, and was amazed at how open people are, because, and I think, and I'm always amused. Particularly, I enjoy open kitchens. I think food needs to be visual today, and at Alfred and Constance particularly, we have a wood fire kitchen. It's very open. And I really get quite a kick out of when people come up and talk to the chef, because I think, well, you've got the courage to talk to the chef, and he's a big guy, and he's a bit intimidating, and he can be a bit grumpy, and you can go and talk to him. I think good on you, I admire you. So I think a lot of times I'll go and I find you've got to talk to people. It's not just going into a restaurant and saying, okay, I had a great, amazing meal at, per se, or somewhere you go and actually talk to people and ask questions, and you'll be surprised how much information people are willing in this industry to give you, from how much money they make to what they would have done, better, how you could do it. And I've even, through those conversations, have actually brought people to Australia to actually come and work with my staff and help me. So don't be frightened to ask people, because this is an industry where there's not a lot of intellectual property. It's a pretty open book sort of industry.
Yep. Please thank Damian Griffiths.
Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
This is great.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been treated to a classic exposition of entrepreneurship tonight. Entrepreneurs, if you read the literature, have many characteristics, but I think one that they all have is that they see things that others don't. Every entrepreneur that I've ever read about, and I'm sure it applies to you as well, they see things that we don't see. Some say entrepreneurs see around corners. And if you listen to the subtext of Damian's presentation tonight, so he said, I want to build a hotel. So he could see, he had a vision to build a hotel. So he buys a cheap block of land, the cheapest block he can find near to the city, and builds a hotel. Builds it in the valley which is run down. So he saw the potential there that others couldn't see. I'm sure many other people looked at the site and didn't know what to do with it. He said, we stay open till 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, doesn't matter whether anybody's there or not. It's not only holding your nerve, but it's seeing a concept. We look for edgy concepts. What are edgy concepts? Well, they're out there. They're a bit beyond what everybody else is doing. And then in the new properties, I look for properties that other people don't see potential in. All of that is, it's a great gift, the entrepreneurial gift of being able to see things that others don't see. Of course, it requires risk-taking and finance and a whole lot of other things to build the business, but really, without that entrepreneurial vision, the rest doesn't come into the equation. It was interesting, Damian, that you didn't mention a business plan when you first started with the Limes Hotel. And that in itself is quite interesting. I'm sure you've got a very detailed business plan now, and that was evident in the way in which your thinking has progressed. But the QUT Business School did the largest study of entrepreneurial startups in Australia. And the thing that's really stood out for me was that the people who'd been able to go from a concept to a successful business were those who didn't have a business plan in the early years. They didn't spend their time developing and slavishly sticking to a business plan. They put all their energy into building the business, just giving 100% of their effort and their energy into building a business. And it seemed like that's what you were describing to us in the early stages. I thought also a lovely touch towards the end where Damian said, I feel my journey has brought me to where I ought to be. And really, in my experience, that's about the best hope that any of us have got to be personally fulfilled and happy. And I think you exhibit both of those things really in spades. It's very, very strong, strongly evident that you're both happy in the space and personally fulfilled and really not looking to exit or for anything else at this stage. And really, we can hardly ask for anything more from life, I think. So, Damian, on behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank you for a refreshingly open, honest and very modest, a country boy modesty that you brought to your presentation. I'd ask you to thank Damian once again. Ladies and gentlemen, would you also thank Ray Weeks? Ray is a wonderful interviewer, the best in the business in this town, in this space. And as always, he asked all the right questions and did all the following up and gave us a really wonderful story tonight. Thanks, Ray. I'd like to thank our generous sponsors who sponsor the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame and the Game Changer series, which I might add was live streamed tonight and will be available on the Hall of Fame website in about a week. But our principal sponsor, Crow Horwath, very generously supports us. Our television partner, Channel 7, who are really extraordinary sponsors and supporters of the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame and its many endeavours. Our major partners, Morgans, NAB, they don't like to be called NAB, NAB, Origin, our radio partner, 4BC, and tonight's event sponsor, Cloverley Estate, our great Queensland winemaker. And I'm going to ask you now to join us on the terrace for refreshments and especially a nice drop of Cloverley Estate red or white. Thank you very much for coming. The next event The next event is on 17th of September when we'll have Don May, another extraordinary Queensland entrepreneur who's changing the face of pizza business in Australia and right throughout Europe. An extraordinary story. We hope you'll be here to hear it. Thanks very much for coming.